Welcome to today's SIG CLI KRM Functions sub-project meeting. Today is Wednesday, July 13th. This is a meeting of the Kubernetes project. Please make sure to follow the code of conduct at all times, which I will paste in chat, and in short says to be nice to each other. My name is Katrina Vieri. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your host for today's meeting. We have a pretty light agenda, and the only thing is something that I just added. So maybe actually start off in first with some stand-ups about what we've been working on lately related to the functions project. I actually have not been having much of a chance to work on KRM functions lately. I've been pretty busy with other community responsibilities and the customized backlog. So I don't really have anything in particular to report, but the topic that I added is based on a ping that we got actually in the customized channel related to the KRM functions versions of extensions versus the older version that customized supported. So it's something I wanted to discuss with the group. Anna, do you have anything you've been doing lately?
I haven't been working on KRM functions, still customized, so just here to listen and get more exposure.
Great. And Menchi, how about you?
Yeah, for me, so I was out, so I missed the last two meeting. So the work recently I'm doing is doing a prototype of using a WebAssembly as the runtime for KRM functions. So some a little more context about this is so WebAssembly it's a kind of a byte format that allow you to run a program in a so-called stack-based VM. So you can think it has a different format similar to containers, but it's more lightweight, and and it can also be run in web in the front and in the browser, and also in a backend server which embedded WebAssembly runtime. So that's the context. So the prototype I'm doing is like compile some functions we have to WebAssembly and then run that in and embed a WebAssembly runtime in CAP, and then run the WebAssembly artifact and doing it that way instead of using a container. So that's the prototype I'm doing.
The idea being that it's lighter weight than a container, but still provides security advantages over exec.
Yeah, so it still provides some provide isolations and sandboxing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's so this WebAssembly is relatively new than container, so we are exploring it.
For the function authoring, if that were to become one of the official runtimes, would the existing libraries that we have work? In other words, JavaScript surely is the primary one. And what are our libraries are, well, Go obviously, is there Go compatibility? And I forget what the other one is that Kept has, I don't maintain it myself. The other library for building KRM functions.
So for the SDK that KEP has, it has a TypeScript SDK and also have a Golang SDK. Mm-hmm. So, but this WebAssembly, so what we are trying to do is like it currently have support converting several different language into WebAssembly, compile that into WebAssembly. So currently the well-supported one are C and Rust, and there are a few others. But Golang has a limited support of compiling that into WebAssembly. So what I'm doing now is like still trying to do it with Golang, since I think most of CAP's functions are writing in Go. So if I can find a pretty good ways to have it working, then I think all other functions writing in Golang can also work.
That's great. If the experiment pans out, I assume you're doing it in KEP for expedience, but would you then make the runtime part of the KYAML function runtimes library so that Customize would also pick it up?
Yeah, sure. So current plan is to have this as an alpha feature in KEP and see how user react. And if everything looks great, then yeah, we can upstream it to KYAML.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess at that point, that would also be the moment to like update the 3 KEPs that this group has, including most notably the registry KEP, to have a support for WebAssembly as one of the function runtimes there, because it will have to have standards indicating how to retrieve WebAssembly based functions.
Yeah, so one of the idea how to retrieve that is like also using OCI. So like you can set, OCI support multi-arc image. So we can by setting the arch and OS to achieve the same distribution for the WebAssembly.
The same as
So currently in KEP we have the container registry and we build multi-arch image for Linux AMD64 and Linux ARM64. So we built for both, and we can add another arch and for the same function, and then so presumably like we have for example in KEP we can for example user specify something for WebAssembly, then it can fetch the corresponding arch and using that image. So that's the plan we have.
I'm not sure I followed correctly. Like for WebAssembly, you need to match the operating system architecture. So is that similar to exec, or are you saying it's similar to containerized somehow? Sorry, I don't
So
have the
what I mean is like we can reuse some of the OCI architecture, OCI infrastructure. So currently in the container distributions, for each functions we build for both the AMD64 and the ARM64 architecture. So and currently Docker and also Podman, whatever the container engine user use. So it will look at the user's desired architecture and then fetch the corresponding one. So by looking at the manifest of that image, so I think potentially we can add another arch in that manifest for the WebAssembly, and for KEP we can like add some logics when it find when it find the user try to request a WebAssembly artifact, it will first look at that manifest and then fetch the corresponding image, similar as what Docker does when it looks like ARM64 and fetch the corresponding ARM image. So that's the idea.
So
Does it
you're
make
almost
sense to you?
pretending like it's a container, and then under behind the scenes, like instead of implementing a separate runtime for it, you're having the KEP function runtime that exists for containers fetch it and then just kind of notice that it was WebAssembly that was requested.
So it's a kind of reusing OCI's stuff to distribute WebAssembly artifacts. So if you have heard what Helm does, it's kind of they are allow using OCI's to distribute chart, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I understand. Correct. I understand the part that like you can use OCI to distribute a variety of things. And like we were talking about potentially doing that with the exec functions, I think, like just because you need a place and specification to store the data. But I guess where I'm confused is the comparison to the containers. Like, are you actually not building this as a separate function, or is it just that it shares the OCI retrieval implementation with the container runtime implementation? Maybe it would make more sense if when we see it.
Yeah, so I think currently how I think about it is this can be at least in KEP, it can be an additional layer of logic on top of the container runtime. So you know, in KEP we have something called KEP file which specify what the user want to do.
Mhm.
So if KEP can detect user is requesting WebAssembly artifact, so it will first try to use that WebAssembly fetching layer, and then if that's not WebAssembly artifacts, then it will pass it down to the container runtime container container engine layers to fetch the image, like Docker.
Mm.
So that's the how I currently imagine that works.
Are you saying like
Yes.
basically they would still use the same image field here for either container or WebAssembly, and we would just behind the scenes detect which one it actually is? Sorry.
So we may change the key. So currently it's image. We may provide something called WASM to indicate that's WebAssembly artifacts. But right now it's on KEP side, we have not decided how we want to achieve that yet.
Okay, yeah. I guess I'm trying to understand what like the implication for the function runtime implementation is, which you probably don't even have decided yet. It's like not at that stage.
Yeah. So for distributing this WebAssembly artifact, one way is as I described with OCI. Another way is like just a URL that can be downloaded, which hosting the WebAssembly artifact somewhere.
Mhm.
So it can be a Google Cloud Storage URL, something like that. So either way should work.
Right. I guess at that point, that's where it will, like, once you validated that this is even a good thing that works and that people are interested in doing, we can start talking about like getting those into the spec of the registry, so that we have a common way between kept and customize of referring to the possibilities here, like, yeah, whether we support like GCS endpoints or OCI endpoints or whatever it is, making sure that both of the orchestrators are going to do that consistently.
Yeah.
I really like the idea. I think that's really promising, the idea of using WebAssembly here. It seems to be a nice balance between the constrained environment that we get from containers, but like that's not very approachable to users and not so performant, and the exec that is like really, really approachable, but not secure.
Yeah. And I also learned that other projects like Istio, they also adopt WebAssembly as a way to write their filters. So in the ecosystem, yeah.
Are they using Go, or you said the Go support was more like experimental? I was wondering if anybody else in the ecosystem is already doing that specifically in production.
For Istio, I think they can use they allow use any language as long as you convert that into WebAssembly, and then it can be used with is that Istio or Envoy? I don't recall exactly. And then it can be used as a filter for the network filter.
Okay, so they don't have an
Envoy.
opinion on where it comes from. That makes sense. Like if they don't have an SDK side that they maintain as well, then it wouldn't matter to them what language the filter implementer is using.
So I haven't checked if they provide a SDK or something. Yeah, but I guess it's I guess they don't care about that as long as you provide a WebAssembly artifact to do the filtering.
Right. Whereas for us, like making it super easy for people to build is really important. So we have the multiple SDKs that we need to make work.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's a very cool update. Thanks, Munchi, for telling us about that. Look forward to hearing more about it in the future. Please keep coming and telling us what's the latest with that.
Yeah, sure.
Natasha, we were just doing stand-ups first because it's been a long time since we've had a chance to get together. So yeah, do you have anything to report about KRM Functions in the past couple months?
No, I'm waiting for our managers to get back to us to see if they want us to work on catalog next quarter. I know they're interested in it, but not sure if it's a priority yet.
Okay. So I added one topic here that we can discuss as well. It's related to the standard, I would say, even though the question is coming from the customized perspective. This is a question coming from a customized end user who currently, it's in the customized Slack channel. They're currently using the legacy exec plugin style to write a transformer for customize. And yeah, they're writing it in Python, and the heart of what they're doing is taking data from the just customized build environment and sticking it into the resources, which is something that, you know, we will never ever do in customized built-ins, because one of our core principles is having reproducible builds regardless of the environment. As long as you have the whole customization tree, you should get the same result. So that's something that we have feature requests for that we deny. But it is true that in legacy, like the legacy format for extensions was kind of the wild west. It let you do absolutely anything you wanted because it was just pure exec. Even the question that they're bringing up is like, my plugin is going to not work anymore in the once you remove legacy exec, because KRM Functions exec is more constrained and doesn't actually expose the environment variables from the host process to the function process. So they're saying, you know, that's going to break my plugin and my workflow, which is based on running this plugin to consume environment variables that are actually coming from my CI/CD environment. That's my personal TLDR of the post. So of course, that's not a decision Kustomize can make on our own, really. Whether or not it's okay for environment variables to be exposed and used in functions, because that has to do with the specification, right? And the common runtime that we're providing. That, you know, if we made that change in Kustomize, it would affect kept as well, because kept shares the function runtime. So yeah, so I wanted to bring that question to this group because it's not really about Kustomize, it's about the specification and what we want to do there. My inclination is that, like, this is not in line with the spirit of these tools. It's not declarative and it's not reproducible. But at the same time, we want to be sensitive to what people are needing to do, and, you know, think about what we would recommend that they do to convert this workflow into something that will work with the future versions of extensions. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that particular problem. I'll link the thread in the chat so we can all see it.
I think to your point about how it's not really in line with the philosophy of our two tools, I think the thing about KRM functions is that they're not specific to any tool. So maybe it doesn't matter if it's not in line with our philosophy, because theoretically any tool should be able to use it. I think I'm in favor of allowing some way of passing environment variables to the function, just because there's so many users that are really struggling to switch to functions because of it.
Yeah, I guess like the alternative is to find some other recommendation for them and facilitate that through like a conversion workflow. The specification itself, as far as I can tell, doesn't support that, right? It's strictly, so it's not just about the opinion of our tools, it's about the opinion of the spec, which currently doesn't support it. So we if we did support this, I think we'd have to add to the spec that in addition to the input that you accept on standard in the form of a resource list, you can like compliant orchestrators also must pass all environment variables, a subset of environment variables, what exactly through to the function process and or the container. Like, how would we constrain that? That could be a security issue too, right? Like if somebody's running an environment where there's a password in the environment variables, and then we just load through all the environment variables into the container process, like that would probably not be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So in KEP currently, you know, in KEP we have a declarative and the imperative workflow, right? So I posted a link to the imperative workflow. So currently imperative workflow allow user to specify a list of environment to be passed into the container in the flags session. If you go down a little bit more. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, basically for this imperative workflow, it's like user have to explicitly specify what environment they want to expose to the containers it by default doesn't expose any environment variables to the container. So this is how CAP currently does. And for the declarative workflow, we doesn't support that, which is the render on the left side. We doesn't support that. So currently CAP only supported in imperative workflow.
Have you received any feedback of this kind on the KEP side, like similar to what the person's posting in Slack?
I don't think I have seen any. So I guess probably because initially CAP only support container based workflow. There's no exact based workflow at the
So
beginning.
nobody's coming from that
So
place. Yeah.
Yeah, so people at the beginning, they cannot do that, so they are not doing that. On the other hand, in customized, initially users are using some exact-based workflow that can access to the environment variables. And then when they try to move to KRM function containers, and then they discover this limitation, these restrictions, and then we see this user request.
Yeah, I see. And like customized doesn't have an imperative mode like this because we don't do in place modifications. I like the idea though of having there be like a declaration of exactly which ones you intend to expose, not necessarily the values, but say like this function relies on these environment variables. In theory, that's something that could be done as part of the function config even. Let's see where. It's not very easy to look at here. So theoretically, like there's very little to there's nothing standard about a function config besides that it's in the KRM format. And I guess the annotation that is not shown in this example I'm highlighting here, but that is pointing customized to where the function is, like that's also standardized. You could, in theory, probably in an annotation like that one, which is, yeah, I'll have to pull up an example of customized usage instead of this to ground what I'm talking about here. Let's see. Maybe the t-shirt sizes one would be suitable. Yeah, so we have in this stanza here, we have the function thing and container image or whatever. You can have container environment, and that would just be a list, like a comma separated list of environment variables that are expected to already exist, and that will be copied in. And if it's there, then that would also end up showing up in the catalog, so that when you're like seeing what a given function is going to do and request, it would be explicitly declared that this is going to request environment variables foobar bars. Does that make sense?
So for this resource, that's this is like a function config, right?
Yes, it's a
A
function
function
config.
config instance, right?
Yes, function config instance. That's exactly what this is.
Okay, so you're saying we can reuse this multi-line string to provide this information.
Yeah, and maybe it would help to like show where that. Let me try to remember the file is. It's like time container, maybe in here. Might also be somewhere else. Here. I think. Okay, so it actually already has that for container. Maybe it doesn't for exec, and that's why they're having the problem.
I thought, I could be wrong, but I think the env string like needs to take string literals. I don't know if it reads from like current environment variables.
Mm,
I also don't know if it works.
like it could be
But I
untested.
think that would- yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's not clear from the description which that is. But on the bright side, what I was suggesting is already a pattern in the code base. So maybe it's reasonable to do this same thing for exec.
Yeah.
Like find out what this is doing, whether it's basically the kept style thing here where it said you can use key or equals value format or only the key, and then we'll take the value out of the environment. That seems pretty reasonable. Maybe that could be done here too. The implication of this is that we're making it, instead of a property of each function invocation, like of each function instance where it's effectively part of the data that's coming in, we're saying that this is like a property of how the function itself operates. Like we're declaring which data it's going to need, what it's going to use, the same way you would a storage mount. Treating it as a storage mount instead of as like config data proper, like, you know, the name t-shirt or whatever being the config data. Maybe it would also be useful to look at announcements. I don't have the bookmark. Let's see. So our cap is SIG CLI, and then probably the functions registry might be interesting, because it would end up showing. Actually, which one do we have the meta? Yeah, it looks like it's here. It was defined in the other cap, but it's also here.
Yeah, I think the schema was defined in the catalog.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll look there instead. It's probably more detailed. Here. Schema. Here we go. Yeah. So right now, these are a little difficult to read, but exact properties, we just have platforms. And then container properties, image require network and require storage mounts. So even at this level, we don't have the environment variable support. So I guess what I'm saying is the implication is the registry would also, like in this schema, the KRM function schema would also have something about require environment variables, or even require these specific environment variables.
So we can do that for the container. What about exact? We want to do the same?
Yeah, that's what I would suggest. That if one supports it, then let the other support it as well. I don't think there's an additional implication, like if we're giving access to that data, whether it's to the exec process or to the container process, like if we're specifically controlling which data it is we're fetching and we're declaring it specifically, I don't think there's any separate implication for exec, but if there is, please point it out.
Okay, I don't recall in exec we have a field for the environment variable.
We don't. That's what I'm
schema.
saying, is that we would add it and we would make sure it works the same way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And yeah, that we constrain it the way that kept is doing. Like, thank you for pointing it out, this imperative mode. I think for the use case that the user brought to us, this would be viable, where they can say key equals value or the value of a key already exported, and then we pull in that key specifically. And the function always, no matter what runtime it is, or like what, actually, new thought, sorry. If we could make a further constrained version of this if we wanted, where we actually don't accept key equals value, we only accept key. So that on individual function instances, so like in the t-shirt transformer example, you won't actually be able to change what the function is requesting. You won't be able to like input instance specific environment variables. The function will have to always consume the same ones. That forces like any instance specific configuration to actually continue to go in the metadata, or the KRM function config.
Yeah, I think that can be a good starting point. So we can start with more restricted way, and then later if a user requests us to relax it, we can revisit this and see what we can do to do it still in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree, Natasha and Anna, as well?
Yeah, this sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. So 2 action items, like add envs in one way or the other, and also confirm what this does. Does it actually work? And is it, what mode does it work in? Is it expecting key equals value or keys or something else? All right. Right, so I will add that here. And then, yeah, we would need, if that's required of implementations, then we need it to be added to the caps as well. Sorry, it's the catalog cap, not the. All right. Anyone else have anything to discuss today? All right, thank you all for coming. It was really great to see you, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks.
See you.